You're listening to Love and Light with Dr. Lisa, Everyday Living in Peace. Day-to-day living can be difficult in our world today, and most people don't know how to live a peaceful, joy-filled existence. The key to this is simple: love. Join me, Dr. Lisa Collins, for the next hour as I unpack and identify the need for a peaceful, love-filled existence by engaging the challenging and hard topics of life. On this show, you will lean into the healing practices that enlarge your spiritual reality through the act of love. This kind of love begins with yourself and your neighbor and transcends age, race, sex, generation, class, and sexual identity. The world changes when we root ourselves in love. Love and Light with Dr. Lisa starts now. I can't hear anything. What happened here? Hold on a second. All right. Welcome. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Lisa, and you're listening to Love and Light, Living Every Day in Peace on Transformation Talk Radio. Stay with us for the next hour and let us help you experience how to bring more love into your everyday life. We're here each second and fourth Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific, 12 Mountain, 4 Eastern, and we have tools for living every day in peace. Our world does not have to be one in which we do not care for one another, hurt each other, or spend time persecuting those who harm others. There are many people endlessly and tirelessly teaching, sharing, and creating to bring oneness and a sense of community and well-being in our collective community. This work is difficult and heavy laden, and still there are those who commit to equitable practices. Sheldon Eakins, Ph.D., is the founder of Leading Equity Center and the host of Leading Equity Podcast. With over 11 years in education, he has served as a teacher, a principal, and the director of special education. Mr. Eakins has a passion for helping educators accomplish equitable practices in their schools. He describes himself as a father, a husband, an equity advocate. He lives in Idaho. He has many topics that are all over the airways. He has helped with teacher prep gap, how to help students of color. He is a voice and wants to be an advocate, a former principal, a former history teacher, just finished his 100th episode of his podcast, and which is all about equity and how to help students stay connected to learning and how to be better culturally and how to confront racism. Welcome to Love and Light, Living Every Day in Peace, Dr. Eakins.
Hey, thanks for having me, Lisa. I appreciate the opportunity.
So, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Welcome to our show. You have a podcast on your own. I was looking back on all of the email documentation that I have from you, from your company, from your business. It's a lot. I have lots and lots of content. I don't know where you find the time. I'm just going to name a few of the topics: dual language, trauma informed, school safety, school readiness, kids cursing in school, racial slurs in school, STEM for girls, utilizing abundance in Black families and communities, school communities and valuing culture, white supremacy culture in your organization, teaching students about entrepreneurship and educator wellness, just to name a few.
Yeah, I've been in the game. This August will make 4 years that I've been podcasting. And I try to come out every Monday. There was a point where in the beginning I was doing 2 a week. I don't know what I was thinking at that time. I was doing Mondays and Thursdays. But then I went back to once a week. It's just a lot. I mean, I enjoy doing the podcast, but I'm a one man band. It's just me. So I do the edits, I do all the social media and posting and all that stuff. So yeah, it's a lot, but it's I actually have two shows now. I have the podcast and then I have a live stream. So it's keeps me busy, but again, this work has to happen. And I'm all about trying to help as many educators as possible with the tools and resources necessary to ensure equity at their schools. Bottom line.
Wow. I'm pretty busy myself, and I don't when I start to look back at all, and I didn't even mention the Equity Summit
Mm-hmm.
that
Oh
I
yeah.
participated in, the Equity Summit as well. It is so much.
Well, again, if I don't do it, who's doing it? That's the way I mean, think about it. Name another equity influenced podcast that you know of. There's not a lot. And then I could even go further and say name another podcast, education podcast with people of color who are the host. And you're not going to find a lot. So again, 4 years deep into this game, and I have had the pleasure of meeting some very awesome people, some very motivated and passionate folks who are wanting to do, help other educators do better in their practice, whether it's leadership, whether it's counseling, it's teaching, whatever it might be, whatever the position and role is. But at the end of the day, I've just been very fortunate to be able to meet so many wonderful people that are share the same passion as I do,
It's
including
so
yourself, including yourself.
it's so well. Thank you. It's. I have been watching for quite some time, so with the emails that I receive, and really, what sparked me to reach out to you this time, looking at everything that I have, is that what happened in Buffalo,
Mm,
and then immediately, like really soon, um I saw frameworks for assistance for people in schools, and that really that warmed my heart, because um, it's hard enough as it is. I mean, it's hard enough as a person
mm,
who has studied my own racialized trauma, and have worked on healing for myself and gotten freedom. It's difficult.
yeah.
It's difficult. And when I saw that email come out, I said, you know what? And I'm looking at the email right here, and I'm looking at a copy of it. And the way that it's always written um, has so much care. And I just want to talk to you a little bit, like, tell us about yourself. Where did you come from?
Where where did I come from? Well, I'm from Houston. I'm from Houston, Texas, and currently I live in Idaho. I never thought I'd end up here. It wasn't on my radar, on my goals of things to do, checkbox kind of vibes. It's just it. I needed a job. Bottom line, at the time, I got done with my doctorate, and I was a school principal at the time, and I thought you get your doctorate and you're supposed to move into higher ed, become a professor or something like that. I I went for a doctorate without a real plan. Like, what do you
Mm-hmm.
do after that? It was just like I want a PhD. That was the thing for me. And I wanted to be the first in my family to obtain one. And so I pursued it, but I didn't have an exit. I guess the post doctorate dissertation plan. And so I just started applying for jobs and in higher ed, and my parents were actually living in Idaho because my dad was working at the university here as well. And so he's like, Sheldon, put in for this trio job. You'll love it. You get to work with high school kids and you'll be in higher ed, everything that you're looking for. And I'm like, yeah, but it's in Idaho though. Like, it's in Idaho. Like, ain't no brothers out there. Like, what am I doing? Why would I apply for that? And it was literally, I kid you not, I applied for this position in the midst of other positions that I applied for, and Idaho State reached out eventually. I had forgotten I had put in. They interviewed me, brought me out there. The campus looked nice. The opportunity was something I couldn't pass up, and so here I am 6 years later. I'm still in Idaho, but I no longer work at the university. I work for myself now doing the Leading Equity Center. I never started the podcast to start a business, to make money or any of those kind of things. It was legit. I was a Black man living in Idaho who was working in high schools, who had students of color, who had other students coming up to me, telling me about their experiences, and me having my own personal experiences and not knowing what to do, not knowing what to say, not knowing what terms were, not knowing the fundamentals of like discrimination. Like I grew up in the South. Like I'm used to, like, it's blatant. I knew exactly where not to go. I knew what stores, like it's out there. It's very open, it's very prominent. But when you move to the Northwest, it's just a different culture. And there's a lot of subtle stuff in it. And I just hadn't seen it before. And I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know how to help my kids and how to help myself. So that was why I started the podcast. I'm not a writer. I don't like to write. So I'm like, I'm not going to be blogging every week. That's not a thing for me. However, I just finished my dissertation. It was a qualitative study, so I was used to interviewing people. So I was like, let's try this format and reach out to articles, people who's written research, who's done this work ahead of me. And most people who write an article are very happy to share about their articles, their publications.
Absolutely.
And so it was very easy to find guests very early on. And again, I was just sharpening my tools, learning so that's what this means, or that's what that means. And okay, so when someone says this to me, this is what it really means. And here's research that supports that. And so I was able to do that. And so again, 4 years worth of just learning, in addition to the network that you build, the conversation that you have outside of the recording time, that has really been very helpful for me.
That sounds, I'm so happy to hear it, because we have similar experiences. And you have such a deep bench of information, knowledge. You're not charging people for this information. You're encouraging all of the things that I wish for, to, community, being together, trying to understand and heal in a collective well-being is where I'm coming from. And you are such a beacon, like a really a light in a beacon out there. So I was like, I have to have him on my podcast, because my podcast is all about people doing good work. It's hard to be discouraged. It's easy to be discouraged because so much is happening. But if I tether myself to those who are doing the work, the light workers, then we together can grow. We can grow and create this community that we know is out there. It looks like it's time for a break. You are listening to Love and Light with me, Dr. Lisa. I am here with, Dr. Eakins, who is the founder of Leading Equity Center. Hold on, we'll be right back, and we'll talk some more about what you could do to lead with equity. You are listening to Love and Light with me, Dr. Lisa, and I'm talking to Sheldon L. Eakins, Ph.D., is a founder of Leading Equity Center, and the host of the Leading Equity podcast, who advocates for equity in education. Please tell our listeners where they can find your information. How can they contact you?
Oh, yeah, you can find me. The hub, I guess, is leadingequitycenter.com. There's everything you can find on the website. If you're a podcast listener, just plug into your, whatever you use for podcast listening. Leading Equity is the name of the show.
Awesome. And I hope our educators and our parents are paying attention to looking at this vast amount of resources. And I was saying on the break how when I saw the email that you sent about what was going on about the school shootings, and in the email is written like, you're mentioning memorials for children, and you're mentioning teachers who were killed, and you're talking about, there have been 17 shootings since
at that time. Yeah.
At that time.
Yeah.
And then you go on to give more data about mass shootings, and then you go on to give resources for people to use for themselves. You have call to action here. So, I mean, there's so much in your work. First of all, let's not invisibilizing what's happening, giving data around something like shootings, as well as giving resources and places where people could get healing. And then you, at one point, you say in this email, you said, and it's the end of school, and I hope you take some time to decompress, you say to the educators, which I never hear anyone talk about the wellness and well-being of educators.
We have to do that, and I try to put something like that in just about every Friday newsletter somewhere in there. I try to squeeze it in there, just like, I appreciate you, the work that you're doing. You know, if no one else is saying it, if I don't say it enough, just know that you are valued and know that you are appreciated, because the last few years, especially during the COVID teaching stuff, it has been really stressful. I mean, we've seen a lot of teachers leave the profession. A lot of folks are changing their mind about, do they want to be an educator because of the stress in so many directions. I mean, there's the political side of things. There are parents and community members that are becoming more vocal when it comes to their thoughts and their feelings on what children should be taught. There are people that are in positions of power that have been able to pass some laws, or at least introduce bills and laws that could, again, impact the way that we are working in classrooms. Then on the other side, you have we have mass murders happening in our schools. And Lisa, I wish I knew the answers, but there's just so much happening that impacts our educators. And so, yeah, I just try to send some sort of a message, something positive. Cause I know sometimes I'm reading, I'm going through the newsletter and I'm like, man, this sounds down. Like, I like, is there something positive? Can I edit something to change it to make this sound a little bit more positive? But that just seems like it's been the case over the last few months. It's just, I don't always have great news to share in the newsletters. I would just wish things were a little bit different. But that's kind of where we're at these days.
It is. And, this next section, I want to talk about challenges, but it is where we are these mm-hmm. days. Being an educator, I love teaching. I mean, I've been in education for quite a long time, that I taught in public school. Now I teach at the college level and have a small business. But I love the kids. I love the families. I loved it. But there is something to be said for systemic oppression as it is in our country, and how it definitely shows up in education. So I think some of the bulges and some of the ouches and some of those jagged edges were put there intentionally, and that's what we're experiencing. And unfortunately, it's hard to put the oxygen mask on the educator, because there's not systems in place to even value the educator's well-being. We want them to love kids. And I say this when I teach admin, those who want to be administrators. Well, you want your teachers to love kids, but you don't love your teachers.
Yeah, it's got to go together, right? And that's part of the whole school community. I've worked with admins as well, and a lot of focus goes on to the students, which I understand the intention of, this is the schools for our kids, but you have people that play stakeholders that play a role within your school and in the building itself. That is your students, that is your parents, that is their guardians, also that's your staff. There's from teachers to teachers aides to bus drivers to lunchroom folks. All of these different positions are very vital to a school and how a school can thrive. And we should be focusing more on the community side of things as opposed to just the students alone. Our adults are dealing with personal issues, probably at the same level, if not some in worse situations than a lot of our students. And so, and then we're still asked to come and present lesson plans every week and grade papers and do all the stuff, that goes along with being a teacher when we have things happening that are impacting us in our personal relationships, in our finances, health, mental health, all these different things that are factors. So yeah, you have to pay attention, not just to your students, but also to your staff.
Absolutely. And I would, in the community well-being as a whole, I always say that, I, that there's really one job for us is to care for one another, and we can't seem to do that. And that community well-being is going to be, I believe, is going to be the healing for our world. We talk about, when I talk about living every day in peace, I'm not saying that everyone's going to get along, but I'm saying, like, how can I be peaceful? And when I look at school systems and how they are today, I'm really concerned about the lack of community epistemology and community well-being for that's this really dominant way of looking at communities. We're talking about all communities. And so I don't know, what do you think is the biggest challenge? I mean, are public schools as we know them going to, be something that stops and then we start over?
That will never happen. We're not starting over. I think the people that are in positions of power, our legislators specifically, are wanting to keep things the way it's always been. I don't see us going back and revisiting. I thought COVID was an opportunity for us to do so. Our schools shut down. We were at home. No one knew what was happening, how to fix it. I thought this was a time for us to revisit, revamp the way we do education, because it's been the same since at least the Industrial Revolution, and it's the structure has remained the same, even though technology has changed, even though our systems have changed as far as what United States or what our country looks like, and the type of jobs that are available in these days. Yet we still have the same basic standardized tests, mastery for a certain level content, age appropriate or age specific content, these type of things, which were founded based off of the Industrial Revolution, because a lot of people were going for trades back then.
Right.
So that tracking, that way that system was created. And it wasn't, and honestly, Lisa, it wasn't for you and I.
It wasn't for us.
The educational system wasn't created for folks like us. So on top of all that, but we still have that same structure. So yeah, I was hoping COVID would be an opportunity, but we're still in the same place. And then will things change? I hope so, but I think we need to, people who are really adamant about advocacy work, that are about social justice, that are about equity in education, really need to start voting more. We need to get better people in office that have at least some educational background would be helpful. These type of things, getting folks, lawmakers in place in order to make some changes. Unless that happens, then we're going to just keep seeing things the same. And I would argue that with some of these recent book bans, CRT bans, and all this other stuff that's out there, I would argue it's gotten a little worse. So it's just one of those things where we really need to try to get other people in office.
And and your voice being illuminated at a to me at a national and international level louder than it is now would definitely be an assistance, because I think people really don't understand. They don't understand what the issues are, and there's this polarization that happens from either side of the right or the left that happens when people start to brand ideas and brand what they think we're doing. I saw a picture in the Washington Post of someone at a board meeting, a parent yelling, and it was just like a visceral kind of picture of this woman yelling at a board meeting. And I took that picture and put it with a picture of one of the Little Rock Nine walking in, and I just cut and sliced it and put it together. Same yelling, same vile hatred, different times.
That's what I'm saying. Like, you see progress, like you see work. Like, okay, Brown versus Board happens a little bit over 60 years ago, and we think, okay, we made some progress, and like Ruby, they banned Ruby Bridges books. Like the idea of, you know, and I was like, well, what's wrong with the book? Like, why are we banning the book? But then again, I think a lot of this comes from, we don't want you to really talk about or know. We don't want our kids to know about the ugly history of our educational system, racism. These things happened. They did happen, but we don't want to talk about it. Don't bring up those. We can't say anything about it. And just to your point, it's just like, okay, I couldn't be a 9-year-old little girl, or I had, you know, I have a little girl. She's 12 now, but I couldn't imagine her being 9 years old, integrating a school, and going through all that. I mean, my daughter has her experiences as a student in this time in 2022 living in Idaho. She has her experience, and so does my son. But I couldn't even imagine what it would have been like at that during those times. And yet we're still, again, generationally, things haven't changed, and we're still back. We're back to square one. Seems like maybe even a few steps back.
Yeah, it seemingly does seem like we're stuck. And a lot of my work is actually working on getting us unstuck. And so that means, like you said, like we have to look at the history. And when I'm working with an organization or a school, and I show the history in these little snippets, and I just kind of like piece it together like breadcrumbs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the parts about us healing that we don't talk about is the interpersonal neurobiology, the implicit and explicit things that happen in our bodies, our generational and historical trauma coming forth in when we feel. And so when I'm teaching, and people's faces are looking like my European American friends are looking really distraught. And I said, do you feel like you want to get up and run out the room? And they're like, yes. I said, that is the interpersonal neurobiology. That is the historical and generational trauma. Like, did my people do this? And I said, it will burn off. You just got to sit through it. And I think we need to start talking about that feeling.
Yeah.
Because they do get up and run out the room, or worse, in my opinion, they get up and go work with my kids. And I don't like that idea either. But I love the work that you're doing. You're bringing healing. You're asking and trying to bring community to people of variety of topics. I mean, you could have like 5 or 6 books. You have a book coming out, right?
I do have a book coming out, and I've been told multiple times, you should have a book based off of your content from the podcast. I've thought about that, and I've actually have some ideas as far as some future things I want to do. But my current book is coming out actually next month. It's available for pre-order. It's called Leading Equity: Becoming an Advocate for All Students, and that one is a very personal slash. I didn't want to preach. Like, I do keynotes and I speak all the time and I do trainings all the time. And so I didn't want this book to be just all about, you know, we need to do better as educators, social justice, be equity minded. I really wanted to give some tangible strategies and tools like talking points, lesson plan templates, journal prompts. There's stuff that's packed within this book. It's not just me telling you how to, you know, be a better educator and all those things. I think a lot of that happens, but I really want to be more intentional with my approach to this book because I wanted it to be a very helpful resource for folks, not just for the next couple of years, but just something that can be referred to in the long run. So it's broken down to several 10 different tools that will help get you on the right path towards leading equity.
That sounds amazing. And so educators will be able to pre-order your book. Mm-hmm. So I want to make sure that you tell us where we can go get your book and where we can pre-order it. And so can you give us an example of, like, I'm a brand new educator. I have no idea. I speak English. I don't know about any other cultures. What would you say to me? What section of your book could speak to me? I have no idea. I don't even know why they're making a big deal about all this equity stuff in the first place.
Chapter one starts off. I believe in self-awareness. Whenever I do training and when I'm working with folks, I say we need to start with self-awareness. We need to identify what our biases are, what our privileges are, and how those impact the way we serve our students. So chapter 1 is called Know Yourself and Recognize Your Position of Privilege as an Educator. And it talks about my own personal thing. I talk about what privileges I have, because often we talk about just white privilege, but there's so many different types
Oh,
of
yeah.
privileges. I'm a male, I'm educated, I have a job, I'm able-bodied, English is my first language. All of these things are privileges as someone who's considered himself a United States citizen. I'm heterosexual, I'm Christian. Like, these are just privileges that I have. Okay, so first chapter talks about recognizing what privileges am I bringing to the table when I'm going into these classrooms, when I'm going into the hallways. What do those look like? And then it talks about the biases that we might have formed based off of that, our lived experiences, based off of our social circles, all these things, and how that contributes to equity challenges within our classroom. So from chapter 1 all the way through, I would say it's kind of broken down in a way that will kind of you will progress. So like even chapter 10, the very last chapter, talks about using social justice as the basis for advocacy. So by now you have gotten to a place to where, okay, I've recognized my biases. I recognize ways to connect and form these relationships with my students inside and outside of the classroom. I recognize how to utilize their assets and not look at them as deficits, but so what? English is not their first language. So what? They aren't where I would love for them to be as far as their reading or math levels. They're here, but how do I get them there? How do we build upon what they already are bringing to the table, as opposed to having a deficit mindset? Then it goes into educating yourself on, like, just how can I further be a better, again, people will say, Sheldon, you're an equity expert. And I say, no, I just try to stay a chapter ahead. There's no way I can know everything. There's experiences I will never have. And so I can try to relate as best as possible, or empathize as best as possible. But some things I just won't be able to relate to, because it's just not part of who I am and my identity. But I could try to understand it from your point of view. So that's what the book is all about.
Awesome. Time for a break. We are very fortunate. You are listening to Love and Light with me, Dr. Lisa, and our guest, who is the founder of Leading Equity Center and is an advocate for equity in education, is with us. Sheldon L. Eakins. Is it Eakins or Eakins?
Eakins.
Eakins, Ph.D. We'll be right back. Stay with us. We are back on with the Love and Light with me, Dr. Lisa. And today our special guest, Sheldon L. Eakins, Ph.D., is a founder of the Leading Equity Center and the host of the Leading Equity podcast, who advocates for education, is with us. Tell us how people can find you. Please tell them how they could pre-order your new book that's coming out.
Yeah, it's you can find everything on the website, leadingequitycenter.com. If you scroll on the homepage there, you'll find information about the book. You'll find information about the podcast and some of my trainings that I offer. I have online courses, online trainings that I do. And I can also come to your facility as well if you're interested in keynotes or trainings in person. But all that can be found on the hub, leadingequitycenter.com.
Wonderful.
The book is called Leading Equity, Becoming an Advocate for All Students.
Nice. And now we can only, as a parent and now a grandparent, we can only hope that our educators want to lead to make sure all kids are getting what they just deserve.
Yeah, the basics,
The basics, exactly.
That's up for debate these days, People misunderstand what equity is. And I don't know if they misunderstand what equity is or if they just want to provide a scare tactic of what equity is. But there's that misunderstanding that equity is taken away from one person to give to another person. And that's not what equity is at all.
No, it's not.
What that is.
I don't know what that is either.
Robin Hood. Yeah. I don't know what that is.
Yeah. I don't understand what that is either. And I always say, like, it's not a pie. Mm-hmm. Right. If you have pie, I can't have pie. It's right. Enough pie for everyone. And it was really interesting. I was at a training. I just came back from the East Coast doing a guest teaching spot. And it was like the course was like systemic racism, challenging times of systemic racism. And the whole course was about that. Mm-hmm. So we're sitting in the course, and one of the European American ladies talks about how her son got in trouble and there was a weapon involved. And she literally said the words like, I didn't want him to be in trouble, and I don't want him to miss out on anything. And I said, wow, that mindset is so deep. That branding is so deep that she doesn't even realize what she's saying. So my child, it's okay if my child goes to jail because he has a weapon, which my kid, when my sons were in school, they made a pea shooter.
Yeah.
And took it to school and were selling it to kids. And when the principal, and I'm an educator, calls me from my school to come over to my son's school and tells me, they have weapons. I was like, are you talking about this pea shooter? That's what we're talking about. If you're wondering what equity is, it's like if a European American kid has a pea shooter, he gets a pat on the back. Don't do it again, Johnny. My kid has a pea shooter. It's a weapon. And you are willing to put that on his record that would follow him all through education.
When statistically, who is more likely to kill someone, multiple people, when we look at whether we want to say it out loud or not, but that's the first thing what's the picture of the person, of the shooter. And often that person that's the shooter doesn't look like your sons, doesn't look like me. Yeah, we're the ones that are often penalized the most or scrutinized the most for violence, weapons, and all these things. But we're really not the people that you should be paying attention to these days. So again, and as I mentioned early on in our conversation, I don't know what the answer is when it comes to the whole school shooting thing. I wish I just don't. I don't know what to do. I just want our schools to be safer. People lean on mental health and say, "Oh, there's mental health issues, and we need to get more school counselors in our schools." Maybe that will help. I don't know, but it's right now. This needs to change. We need to start figuring out what's the best process. I don't want to. If I was still in the classroom, I wouldn't want to have a weapon. So arming teachers wouldn't be an option that I would want to.
No, I don't think so. Not at all. And then one of the things that I talk about in my spiritual writing, Love of Light, A Guide to Peace and Oneness, is this foundational level of what we're teaching our children through the media. I mean, I was watching my son. I have a younger son who's biracial, and we were watching Boss Baby, and the black baby was barking like a dog and chasing the white baby. And I was just like, okay, pause. I said, why not pause that? And then him and I had a conversation, and we stopped watching Boss Baby. We stopped watching that. But these are the kind of invisibilization that we're getting in our media over and over and over again. We're teaching children before they can talk. The black baby is bad. They will bark like a dog. They are subhuman. Like Dr. Khalifa says, it's like over and over and over again. And I think part of it is parents stop and pay attention to what we're feeding our children and feeding ourselves.
Let me give you another example. So my name is Sheldon. I get asked like a million times, "Oh, you're like Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang Theory." And I'm like, I've never watched this show before. And people will ask me, well, how come you never seen the show Big Bang Theory? It's a popular show. Everybody's on it. This guy named Sheldon, he's a doctor as well. So like, you just remind me of him. And I say, the challenge that I have with this show is I feel like it upholds white supremacy. When you look at the characters, these are all scientists. They're all smart people, high top of their, professions, and have all this research. Not one black person is on this show. They just added a woman, maybe the last few seasons that was a scientist as well. But all you had was white men and an Asian guy. and just very typical, stereotypical, who's smart and who's good in STEM and all these things. And you got one woman and no black people in that show, or brown people in that show, or
Right.
or none of our Hispanic folks are in that show. And I was like, I don't watch that show because what kind of message is happening here? What are
Exactly.
they perpetuating when it comes to, and it's comedy, and I get it's funny. It's just not of interest to me.
No, and it doesn't bring value. And I think that we really need to hold our media to task.
Yeah.
We need to hold our media to task for what they perpetuate, and that shows an example. And I think when I went to my daughter studied over in Scotland, so I went over and met her after she finished, and I turned on the TV and immediately felt something different. They had people of color characters who were characters. They weren't people of color. They were characters in the show. They happened to be people of color, but I could feel the difference right away. And in America, which is the settlers' colonialism, we've captured, and Native American people took their land. I don't know if you know, I have a short film called "Be Careful What You Ask For," and in the short film, it breaks racial consciousness. When people see the film, they don't realize that they had racial consciousness to break, because it's a European man and wife having a cup of coffee talking about the state of the nation, what we're used to. But at the end of the film, the European American man is in tears over Black lives. Why is that radical? Why is that radical?
From my experience, a lot of it, I've met some white men that they just lived a life where a lot of stuff that just wasn't in their purview. They wouldn't have known anything about it because this is a life, this is their background, this is where things are. So my goal in a lot of these type of trainings and these type of situations is to try to bring some thoughts that you probably didn't think about, or perspective that you didn't think about. Now, I always know, and I'll say this, and I say this when I enter into my trainings. I'm not going to change everybody's life and hearts and minds within 6 hours, 4 hours, or whatever. One-time trainings, things like that. It's gonna take multiple touches for folks to realize. Some people, yeah, it'll click right then, right first time, but other people might take a little bit longer. Often it takes a little bit longer for people who just are so far removed from experiences outside of their own background, their experiences, their social circles. It may take them a little bit longer, but my goal is for them to at least at some point come in with an open mind and be willing to just listen and try to take that information and have an empathetic lens.
Yeah. Show them the film.
Show them the film. Okay.
show them the film, and it seems to help all people. I'm glad about that. So if there's people listening, we have a little time left. How can they take a role? What are some of the joys that have come from this work? I mean, it's so wonderful to see you online, because I have been watching your work for a very long time, and it is for the good of the world. I love that kind of work, because it is what we're all, whether there's a part of you out there, even if you say no, there's a part of you is that for the good of the world, for the good of the whole.
So I'm sorry. Well, so what was the question?
So what are some of the joys for that have come from your work? And what would you say to people? So let's take that one first.
Mm-hmm. Some of the joys, people ask me what's the biggest benefit of being a podcaster. For me, it's not financial things. It's from the network of people that I know. I know a lot of people. And because I don't just hit record. I like when we set up time for an interview, we'll talk 15, 20 minutes. Sometimes I've talked to people for an hour and we haven't even hit record yet. And just we talk, I get to know you, and we have these conversations, and we hit record. And then afterward, there's a little, post, dialogue as well. And it's like, let's keep in touch. Let's exchange numbers, things like that. Those things happen. And people will reach out to me, say, hey, Sheldon, I need training, but I need it in Spanish. Okay, I got you. I got somebody. that can do that for you. Sheldon, I need some training, but I need early childhood. I need rural district, and I need this, like all these specific. I got you. I got somebody for you. So like the amount of people I know that are very specific, have specialties in a lot of areas centered around equity. I just, my network alone, it's just, you can't it's irreplaceable, it's priceless. You cannot take away from that, and that has been the biggest. And of course, obviously, I feel like I've learned a lot more from 4 years ago to where I'm at now. But I would say the network that you grow, it's probably the most beneficial.
Okay, so I'm just like, we have a few minutes left. I'm just like, what I just need to, when is the in-person, all the Sheldon's contacts, we all going to get together, and when is that happening?
I don't know how to do in-person events. I've tried a couple of times. And then COVID has like, there was about 3 years ago, I was going to do a whole retreat in the summer, and then like COVID happened right then and there, and it's I had to revisit that. Most of my stuff living in rural Idaho has just been virtual. I mean, I do travel from time to time, but it's not a lot of traveling. So I don't know.
Okay, well, I'll have to invite you to mine then.
Yeah, invite me to yours. I can host a virtual event all day. I do virtual stuff, but I haven't done any in-person events. I don't even know what that would look like in agenda and all that stuff. So maybe, who knows?
Okay, well, I feel it coming in the future. Yeah. I feel it coming in the future. We are at the end of our time. I can't tell you what a thrill it has been for me to talk to you. And I was looking back at thank you. Over those emails and all the information I have, it is just, I need to catalog it. I mean, it's so much. And I want to thank you. If no one has thanked you, I want to thank you for all the work you do for all of our children, whether they know it or not. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much, Sheldon, for being the person that you're being. I know your parents must be very, very proud. And you talk about your children.
Yeah.
I just want to thank you for being out there in the world.
Thanks for having me. This is the work. I mean, this is what motivates me. I can check my stats and my downloads and everything every month, but just talking to an actual person who listens to my show is really empowering, and it makes you want to keep going.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone who was here. Treat yourself like your best friend. We love you and love yourself. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for listening to Love and Light with me, Dr. Lisa, Everyday Living in Peace. You spent the last hour engaging in challenging and transformational conversations, all for the purpose of living a peaceful, joy-filled existence. Join me next time to continue growing in love and light through healing practices and acts of love. To learn more or work with me, Dr. Lisa, visit educationthroughengagement.com. That's educationthroughengagement.com. Remember, the world changes when we change by coming home to love. Tune in every second and fourth Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, here on transformationtalkradio.com.